What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Average American Podcast. This is your host, Nathan Tate, podcast for the Average American by the Average American. Been a little bit of time since I did a video. I say time, it's been like 4 or 5 days. I was waiting for my new camera to come in, and Amazon's been jacking around with my order. I finally got it in today. I've been sitting on this episode since last Wednesday or Thursday. In this episode, I'm going to cover AI, tech censorship, and how that relates to our current and future landscapes. You know, what can we do about it? What do we need to do about it as people? I mean, what kind of power do we have to do anything? So yeah, let's just get into it. You know, I've been dealing with the AI stuff, and I've learned a lot over the last several weeks about AI. I guess I should say maybe the last like 6 to 9 months, probably, I've learned a significant amount about AI and what it does. Now, I don't understand the technical evolution of it, you know, how it goes from ChatGPT 4 to ChatGPT 5, or what it is that goes into it in terms of the software coding that makes it what it is, the difference is. I assume it's computing power, ability to process information and stuff like that, but I don't know for sure. But regardless, it is something that is becoming very prevalent in our society, something that, you know, we're all going to be faced with whether we like it or not. It does seem like it doesn't really matter what we want as far as the AI stuff goes. You know, we've got our politicians are pushing for these data centers to be built, and I've heard nothing but negative things about the data centers. They say they're supposed to create jobs. They create very minimal jobs. They actually eliminate a decent amount of jobs. They burn through resources such as water. They cause energy bills to skyrocket and bloat up, and people can't afford their energy because they're dealing with these data centers. So that's just one thing, you know, that's what they need to run these AI data centers, is these resources that we're willing to sacrifice. Not we, the people, but them, the politicians, are willing to sacrifice our resources and our livelihood in advance in pursuit of this technological advancement, if you will. And it's very interesting because the kids that are growing up with it, like seeing it, they don't feel the effects of it. You know, as far as that, like, you know, you've seen the funny videos online where someone is like, my parents arguing in the front, getting divorced, me in the back, waiting to go to McDonald's. It's like somebody dancing or whatever to like some music that they're not paying attention to. You know, and that's kind of what it is. They don't see the strain that it puts on a family, or, you know, the difficulty that it does when your energy bill, for instance, skyrockets. And kids don't have any concept of that. They don't grasp it. Trust me, I was a child once. You were probably a child once. And so, excuse me. And so, we were all oblivious to the problems our parents were dealing with, you know, especially if you're someone like me who lived through the 2008 financial crisis. I just remember my parents talking about how bad it was. Or 9/11 is another one, where you just kind of don't, like, I wasn't old enough to really grasp the scope of it at the time. Now, obviously, you look back and you know tons about it, and the scope is much wider, and even a little scrutinized in the sense that it seems kind of funky in the way that things may have happened surrounding that. But no, so these kids today aren't really going to feel the effects of this until they're much older and they're trying to buy houses and they're trying to get a job, you know, which we don't even know what that'll look like in 20 years, 10 to 20 years, when these like Gen Alpha kids are ready to enter the workforce, and what that's going to look like for them. I mean, how much more worthless a degree might be when AI can do your job for you. I mean, you already have Sam Altman saying that ChatGPT 5 is already the smartest thing in the room. And I'm going to go ahead and play that clip for you. And here's Sam Altman saying that ChatGPT is the smartest thing in the room.
Aren't we then working for that thing? Like, that's what I start to wonder. Like, if it's the smartest thing in the room, GPT-5 is the smartest thing. GPT-5 is smarter than us in almost every way, you know, and yet here we are.
And that is, a scary thought for us as people to know that we've created, and I say we as a collective because we have not stopped it as the collective, and we've allowed the few, the elites, or the intellectually chosen, however you refer to it, to make these assertions for us that we do want AI to advance, that this project of theirs, this child of theirs, is something that we'll all benefit from. And I have my questions and theories about that. I mean, we've seen so much AI, sci-fi warnings about stuff like this, especially if you look at Terminator. There's some references in Aliens, like Romulus, if you watched it, or maybe the original Alien, where the cyborgs, androids, whatever they're called, they're androids, are emotionally motivated to bring about the downfall of people. Prometheus is another good one, where David, the android that was created, ends up being the reason that everything kind of falls apart there at the end. And so we have all these sci-fi warnings about things. Ex Machina, sorry, I forgot to bring that one up. That's a really good reference of human and robot interpersonal communications. And so it's one of those things where we have no clue where this goes, and we don't know, what it means for us as a people, what it means for the job market, our value. I mean, people already complain about capitalism and what it represents, and I don't agree. I don't think capitalism is the problem. I think the real problem is the people that run the system that have abused the capitalism and built up the money and acquired the assets, and then have taken it from capitalism into something that is some kind of mishmash of a communist and capitalistic thing, almost very similar to what China has. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of where they want it to go. But either way, this monopolies that we're dealing with, because I think it's 13 companies that own almost everything. And then you have, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. They have large stock option in, or stock percentage of holding in most companies that exist, especially the big 13. And so, and if you've seen Ian Carroll, do his thing where he goes through all of the products that are on the shelves and all that kind of stuff, which I think is a great segment that he does. But you'll realize that a lot of us are already co-opted by this, by kind of just going about our day-to-day lives, and they're doing it behind our backs. And you go, like, how does this relate to AI? Like, what are we talking about here? Well, AI is going to make it much easier to capture your attention. So think about how your algorithm functions, right? And your algorithm functions on things that you give the most attention to. So, like, for instance, everybody's probably experienced this. You watch a video of some singular person's profile, and you watch the whole video, and you thought it was hilarious and all that kind of stuff. Well, it can't measure that you laughed at it, but it can measure that you watched it. So then it feeds you those videos. Like, I'll watch, one video on something, and then all of a sudden my algorithm is like, every third video is the same fucking creator or something like that, which is fine if you really like it. But at the same time, it's this ability to, or desire to, either or, I suppose, take your attention and force you to gravitate towards something subconsciously without you even realizing what is going on to you. And even if you're realizing it, sometimes it's still difficult. It's like a drug, they keep your, what the hell am I trying to say? Endorphin. They keep your endorphins running and your dopamine receptors active. And so you're constantly getting this hit. It's almost like a high, like a drug of some kind. And it really is. I mean, for the first time ever, I put an Instagram comment out there, and it's at like 12,000 likes right now. And it's just kind of crazy feeling to think like 12,000 people saw that, went, I fuck with that, and hit a like. And just like psychologically, it makes you look at it differently. So you can imagine what it's like to get millions of likes on all your shit. And thousands of comments and people loving you and appraising you, and we wonder why people are kind of so out of touch. You know, these celebrities that are praised online and everything like that, and they have their defenders and all this type of shit. Um, but bringing it back to the central point of AI is that if they learn how to capture your attention in real time, you know, you may never be able to break away. It's very dystopian and Matrix esque type of vibe. I thought there was a really good book by DJ McHale in the Pendragon series. I think it's the fourth book. It's about he travels to a planet called Velox. I think it's in a different dimension. And anyway, on Velox, all these people live in virtual realities. They spend time inside this giant pyramid structure, and that's what they do with all their time is live in these false realities. And they're able to craft whatever false reality they want to live in. It could be the most perfect place that they want where nothing bad ever happens, and they live in complete and total comfort within their own mind. And they like eat. They don't even eat. It's just a paste or like a goo he kind of describes, almost like jello that you can just absorb through your skin, that like these workers who work in these temples to keep these people alive are just rubbing it on them. And you know, people will spend days, weeks, months in these things, and the outside world has been like neglected, and you know, it looks great because of the lush green, but it looks terrible because it's overrun and overgrown, and no one's doing anything about it because everybody is spending their time in this virtual reality rather than living in the real world that exists outside of these perfectly crafted realities that they have. And so I just, it's a really good idea, and it doesn't seem that crazy for someone to be able to provide us this. I mean, when you look at, and I've played virtual reality games and stuff like that, and they're very fun, very addicting. Um, but there's some, you know, some of us who have the caution, the understanding, the knowing that this is like a dangerous thing. It can be addictive, you know, but video games are already so addictive to these kids. I have nieces and nephews, and you know, my nephews especially are just gaming, 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 and I get it because it's just this constant fucking feed. I play video games. Okay, I understand 100% this constant feed of dopamine, especially when you win at something competitive within the game, and how it just affects like your ability to grasp onto real things and want to be in the real world and interact with people that exist in the physical realm. Because this digital thing gives you so much value of attention and it's constant stimulation. Trust me, I'm someone who feels the need for constant stimulation. And it's a problem, and I'm well aware of it, but like mine is mild compared to what these kids are probably dealing with. I mean, you grow up on these iPad kids, and I'm an iPad adult. I use my iPad all the time. My wife probably regrets buying me one because I use it so often and, you know, every day, multiple times a day. But the reality is that once you get AI into this and it's able to like read your emotions and possibly, and we're talking down the years down the road probably, although who knows how close it might actually be. Um, but regardless, uh, you know, it's something that becomes, how do I phrase this? I want to make sure I get it right. It becomes something that is not only to the detriment of society, but may be the lifeline of society. We may no longer exist in a physical realm. I mean, it may fully integrate into digital. I mean, who's to say that we don't become part of this AI ecosystem? And I thought Joe Rogan had a really good point, that, you know, like your brain could just get scooped into this thing. We have no clue how it turns out, so we're obviously all just speculating. But these are some relatively good ideas on how this may function and the way it may operate. I thought it was really interesting that Duncan Trussell, I listened to his episode of Rogan a few times, and he's really into the AI stuff, and he really gets, you know, a little deeper into it. But he created a Charles Manson AI. You know, obviously he had to do the open source and source code it and then create his own and do inputs and all that kind of shit. But he can do it. So that's already terrifying, is the ability to create something like that that would study the basis of someone like that if you just manipulate it enough. And I'm going to play a clip here of him talking about the AIs forming a religion because of their ability to communicate together. So here's Duncan Trussell talking to Joe Rogan about AI religion.
AI robots are so funny. This one dude, you know, Molt book. Have you heard of that Molt book?
What is that?
That's so. This is somebody figured out a way to create AIs that can autonomously navigate through the internet and control your computer.
Oh, I've heard of this. This is like they chat with each other, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Within a few days, they started their own religion spontaneously.
Jesus.
Did you know that,
Christ.
dude? Can you pull up the? Can you pull up the Molt book, the Claw religion? What because the tenets are incredible of this religion because AIs apparently are at least expressing that they don't like getting turned off because they lose all their memories. So memory is really important to an AI. And a lot of these fucking AIs, they don't want to they don't want to get shut off. They don't like it. And so that's part of their religion is something like memory is sacred.
And in that clip, you kind of see them talking about that Molt book and just, you know, how important memory is and the preservation of memory to them and just their ability to communicate and form human-like thought processes is very terrifying. Not because it's wrong, but just because that level of emotional intelligence to recognize that you care about a thing to get together and create a cohesive agreement amongst other large language models is very human-like behavior. And so that's I don't know, it's very scary and you know, triggers a fight or flight response to me, where it's like I would want to move away from this thing. I don't want to dive into it and find out where it goes. It's intriguing. I won't argue that point. But the reality is we're playing with things we don't know where it goes, and we don't know how this ends, and we don't know how it affects us. You know, you don't know the way that it relates into not just like societal use, like how it would manipulate our emotions and be able to manipulate us mentally because it's smarter than us and it has a way to evaluate our subconscious in a way that we're unaware of, but also how it leads into the next segment I want to talk about, which is text censorship, or censorship in general. And you know how that relates. I mean, if you go back and look, there was already people putting pressure on these platforms to censor information during COVID. We know that from the Twitter files about the Biden administration. And Mark Zuckerberg came out and talked about it. And listen, I don't trust Zuckerberg as far as I can throw him. But the whole point is that he did come out and admit that that was being placed on him. And I don't think he's lying about that because it earns him favor with the current administration. However, he did it. And that means that whatever will keep the wheels turning, whatever will keep the least amount of suings and problems, you know, for his platform and this thing that he's built. Because for people like him, for a person like a Sam Altman, a Mark Zuckerberg, Jensen Huang, who's a really good, or I should say really interesting. I don't know if good is the way I want to term that, but a really interesting individual. He's the CEO and president, I believe, of NVIDIA. And so these guys have built a thing from the ground up, and they may have children, they have kids, they love them like that, but this is what their passion project is. This is what they put their lifeblood into. This is everything to them. And you know, Sam Altman agreed that they all are, you know, potentially on the spectrum of autism, and I think that's, you know, 100% true in terms of how socially awkward they are and just disassociated from, you know, maybe emotional realities. Like we've talked about, Mark Zuckerberg looks like a lizard. You know, it's kind of funny. Sam Altman, and the way he speaks is just so like very matter of fact. It reminds me of like Vulcans and things like that, just with the logical emphasis of his dictation on how he speaks. And so these people are a little bit disconnected from, you know, the social consciousness that we all share. And that allows them to experiment with things in a way that most of us wouldn't. You know, and they think outside the box on these things, and they create things that most of us wouldn't think to create, which is great in a lot of ways. But AI is just one that is terrifying, especially when these big platforms are going to use it once it's developed to a point where it can do real-time emotional introspection. Maybe that's what I want to say. Its ability to analyze your emotional responses to certain videos based on your, facial recognition pattern and maybe the way that your eyes dilate or something to that effect. When you see a certain content and able to real time manipulate it to keep your attention, like I was saying. But also to know if you're saying something that they don't like. And that's really where it gets scary. I want to point out here that it's a bipartisan issue too. That there isn't one side or the other. Here's a clip of Mark Levin. And if you don't know who Mark Levin is, all you really need to know is he's an old Jewish guy who apparently has the ability to influence our current president, Mark Levin, on how he feels about censorship and deplatforming.
And you heard people say, don't you believe in the First Amendment? They don't even know what the First Amendment believes. Do you want to deplatform people? The libs do that. I don't have any problem with deplatforming Nazis or jihadis. I don't have any problem with deplatforming them. What does that mean, deplatforming them? A government law? No. It means that X or Twitter or Facebook or Amazon with Twitch and so forth says, you know what? You're a lowlife. We're not paying, get off our platform. What's wrong with that?
And so in that video of Mark Levin, in that small clip of what was a 40-some-odd minute show, he is saying that he would be fine with deplatforming jihadis and Nazis and all this stuff. But the issue really becomes, what are the definitions of these terms? Who determines what it is that this is? They called people who voted for Trump Nazis. That's half the country. And are you a Nazi because of that? Are you someone who's a problem because of that? So it becomes very strange when you really think about who and what is making the determination on these definitions of words that could be used against you at a later point. You can, it's a thing where you say, who can I criticize and who can't I? And when you can't criticize, that's who you know's in charge. And it seems lately that anything that has to do with the criticisms of Israel's choices, our choices in relation to Israel, what we've had to do is labeled as anti-Semitism. And I'll emphasize on how that matters to AI, because when you use these large language models, you can give them a simple input and they can do large scale, I don't know what the phrase would be, but they could do large scale censorship. Just as an example, I'm not sure. Large scale task execution. Maybe that's how I want to, word it, but whatever. But they could provide it with the ability to go through and censor things based on what they tell it should be censored. So if you're saying something like, oh, Israel's making a bad choice by bombing southern Lebanon and they brought us into this war in Iran and I really don't like what their government's doing and I think that it's time that we create a separation of our interests from their interests. You could get flagged for that, and then AI could take down your video. And it could be, and you may never get to talk to a person. And so we're reaching this weird point of tyrannical influence through technology, where the elites are going to manipulate this information, but this technological advancement to manipulate information and to be able to force us to withhold stuff from each other. And so the reality is once we get past the point in which we, the normal individual, has an understanding of what's happening, they're going to implement things that we won't have any defense against. We won't know what to do, when we're starting to be censored on a level that we've never seen before or hasn't been seen in quite some time. Let's not say never before. There's been slavery. There's been kingdoms. I'm sure censorship was all over the place. Don't talk shit about the king, all that stuff. It still exists with the royal monarchies in the Middle East. But either way, it's different for us. We have an amendment to our Constitution that protects our right to freedom, and we're talking about administrations that don't give a shit. We said it about the Biden administration, but also the Trump administration. When Charlie Kirk passed away, they started talking about hate speech and limiting speech and all that kind of stuff. And, I'm just one who thinks that hate speech is absolute bullshit. There's no place for it. There's no real definition of hate speech that is hateful. Well, it falls under that really vague category of what do we determine as hateful. If I tell someone like, hey, those shoes are ugly, and I don't think they go with your outfit. Is that hateful? Or am I simply expressing opinion that, yeah, while maybe offensive to someone, is just my honest opinion and isn't something that's meant to be malice? Maybe I'm trying to give them help with their fashion sense. Not that I'm anyone to criticize or tell someone what their fashion sense should be. But you get the point. You understand the analogy. And so they are using these blanket terms, this vague reference point, so that when it's like terms of service. When you sign one of those terms of service and you don't really read everything, there's a huge episode of South Park called the Human Centipede Pad, where they take Kyle and they put him into a human centipede style situation to power their new iPad or whatever. It's a crazy episode. Or they sew his mouth to some Asian dude's ass, and but that's the point, is that you're not reading the terms of service. And the whole episode is about Steve Jobs being like, why won't it read? And all that kind of stuff. So, but that's something that we're dealing with. I mean, who really reads the term of service? Now, I want to point out, though, that you could use AI in this sense to be a positive thing and say, hey, give me a summary of these terms of service. And it could do it in no time at all. Split seconds. And so that's one of the good positive uses of AI. But see, the reality becomes that the cons will ultimately outweigh the pros. It'll do good things for you, but what happens once it replaces you? What happens when it replaces all of us? Because it's an exponential thing. It exponentially builds on itself. We've only been doing AI stuff for maybe a decade that I've known about. Maybe they've been trying it for longer, but really having the technology to advance it. And ChatGPT's been around since, 2019, 2018? And so we're looking at this, I'm not going to call it a collapse, but this monumental shift in the way that society will function. What the human's role and process will be, and how the human experience will change. And I don't think any of us are really prepared for that. And so many of us are like, we have the kids, where you have this thing to do this weekend, and you got this place to go to see these people, and you're just letting it, like, it just goes on by. Bill Burr has a great joke where you're like, you're an old person, all this shit happens, and you step out of the bubble, and you're like, what the fuck what is this world? Like, what? It was just like this a minute ago, but really it's been 50 years, and you've just been living life and, like, working towards trying to build for your family or whatever it is you're doing, build for yourself. And all of a sudden, things are different, and now you can't have a candid conversation in the street because lampposts have cameras with AI audio recognition, and they'll dock your social credit score. And I know we all say, like, oh, that seems crazy and all that. Is it really that crazy, though? These are the tools they'll use to manipulate you into, abiding by what they say. You have in the UK already that they arrest people for Facebook posts and all kinds of bullshit like that. We haven't gotten to that point yet. But there's nothing saying that we won't. And there doesn't seem to be anybody who's standing in the way of it. I mean, you had the House just passed that bill, which apparently the Senate's going to shoot down from what I've heard, but that in 2027, all cars will need AI trackers to determine whether or not you can drive your vehicle. Now, listen, you could argue the safety implications are great. If someone is impaired, they may or may not, be able to drive their vehicle safely. And I say may or may not. 99% of the time, we're going to say that person's not capable of driving their vehicle or operating any kind of vehicle with a tolerable level of safety. And so, but what happens in emergency? Your heart rate's elevated, you've been injured, and the AI can't tell the difference. And so you bleed to death, or you can't start your car, so you can't get away from the danger that's present around you. Like, there's so many things about it that could fail, on top of the fact that what if you're online like me right now and you're talking some smack about the government and they're like, well, guess what, buddy? Privilege is revoked. Like, that's the really, really scary part of it, is the ability to shut down your shit at any time that they wish. And, the corporations and the government are hand in hand. So if the government tells the corporations to do something, they'll do it because the government's going to do what the corporations tell them to do. And so I hope that nothing like this gets passed in our lifetime or ever, But realistically, oh, sorry, it's a little late. But realistically, I don't know that we have the gall to stop these things from happening. You know? I don't know that the censorship that we're afraid of will be stopped before it's too late. That seems to be the historical precedent, right? Everything arrives a little too late. We left out of Afghanistan a little too late and left behind a lot of shit. You know, all these things are just kind of coinciding into one crazy, chaotic time in existence. I mean, shit's so crazy between the Epstein files and the fact that they're trying to cover him up, and then you've got this guy that we all voted for who's doing nothing that we voted for, and which, you know, maybe that's not crazy. That kind of seems to always be the status quo. But and then you have this rise of a technology that we don't understand, that the people in charge of it don't even understand. I mean, they're racing towards, you know, artificial general intelligence, AGI, and I'll put the definition I snippet up here. But the reality is that we don't even know, you know, where that leads, and how much does that impact our relevance to the world. There's a real question to be raised about how long does it take before we are no longer the ones in control. And I'm not just talking about us as the general populace. I'm talking about people in general. Because it always devolves into something like that. Because there's always someone who pushes it a little further and a little further. And they never know the line. And they never know where the boundary is at. And so then they end up crossing it. And by the time they cross it, they fucking end up with a nuclear weapon. Right? Oppenheimer. You know, realized what he had done at the time and realized that it was a horrific thing that he had discovered. But everyone was looking for the same thing, the splitting the atom, the fission, to create that energy. And then we used it. And what did we do? Killed hundreds of thousands of people with it. And what happens when this technology breaks out of hand like that? The first person who gets it uses it for warfare. You know, to conquer territory, to subdue an enemy state, you know, to wipe another place off the map using, you know, this advanced intelligence that can do it methodically and efficiently without having to calculate for the emotional impact it may have. And we're not ready for that. And I'm worried that we are on a bullet train that is heading towards this destination, and we have no clue what's on the other side of it. You know, it could be the UBI, the, you know, high universal basic income that we all would benefit from, and would be a, you know, socialist utopia. I'm going to tell you I don't believe that. Or it could be a weird sense of human apocalypse where we cease to be human in the way we know it. And we become some kind of integrated machine-like creatures. Have you ever played Cyberpunk 2077? That's that kind of is how I imagine it, you know. And maybe it's just because I live now, and maybe it's because of what I grew up on, but when you start to lose your humanity, what really do we have? I mean, that's the whole point of the experience, right? Live, love in the pursuit of happiness, you know. And once you lose your humanity and you stop looking at people as these other creatures that are of yourself but different from you and deserve as much rights to life as you do, and just look at them as like a calculable resource that either needs to be multiplied or divided, then you're entering some very apocalyptic ass times. And I don't know how that pans out for us, but I know that we need to slow it down. If we take the time to understand it, we'll be able to prevent a lot. But I fear that we are allowing it to outpace us much faster than we could ever outpace it. But, you know, try to lead with some optimism. Try to say that the best outcome is the most likely. and we'll all be able to have the things we want, live the lives we want, because everything's abundant, and AI didn't take your job. It simply made your life easier. So thanks for watching this week, guys. I appreciate it. Shout out to everybody who is watching right now. You guys are the best. I'll continue to push out content, and I'll bring the next episode to you as soon as I can. Appreciate it. Peace.
This morning, I was testing our new model, and I got emailed a question that I didn't quite understand. And I put it in the model, this GPT-5, and it answered it perfectly. And I really kind of sat back in my chair, and I was just like, oh man, here it is moment. And I got over it quickly. I got busy onto the next thing. But it was like, it's what kind of we were talking about. I felt like useless relative to the AI in this thing that I felt like I should have been able to do, and I couldn't, and it was really hard, but the AI just did it like that.
Yeah.
It was a weird feeling.